what is Chat GPT? Let's do an introductory what's the overall?
Okay, so Chat GPT is an AI. It's developed by a company called OpenAI. It is one form of AI, but it is the type of artificial intelligence is a large language model. So it's complicated, and I'll leave it at that. But there's also something known as a natural language processing, which is also what it is. So you can speak to it like you would speak to another person, and it will give you, or it should give you, what you're wanting. And so GPT is generative pre-trained transformer. So it's been pre-trained on all of this different information. It's been pre-trained on all of these different articles. I mean, millions to billions of academic articles and blogs and Reddit and you name it. So a lot of the riches that we have to offer as humanity, and a lot of garbage as well. So it does require critical thinking and using these technologies still. This is an enhancement to what we do. This is something that we can employ in our everyday lives to help us become more productive, to help us organize our thoughts, to help us test ideas and even poke holes in ideas that you have. There's ways of creating an argument with it and saying, hey, I have an idea and I want you to test its strength. And it will actually argue and combat with you and say, well, this and that and the other. It will be as aggressive as you want it to be, as you prompt it to be.
Let's give a really simple example. So let's just start really basic. We're gonna build from there a little bit. Give just a really simple example of how a realtor might be using it in their business right now. For example, kind of give the example of someone writing a blog article.
Okay, so let's take what we did in one of the masterminds that we had that I used as an example. We needed to write a series of questions that a potential lead might be asking us about the current market. So we went to ChatGPT and we said, I need 20 questions that a potential lead would be asking about the current Austin market. So we were specific about what we wanted. We were clear about what we wanted, and we prompted it to generate 20 questions. Now, it did generate 20 questions. We reviewed
and it did that like immediately. Literally, it takes maybe 30 seconds, and it created those 20 questions on the screen.
Right, or less, depending on the model that you're using. Without splitting too many hairs, we're talking about ChatGPT 3.5. Now we're at ChatGPT 4, which is a more advanced model. It is slightly slower, but its capabilities are more concise and a little bit more reliable. You still have to check it, of course, but it's functioning much better. So just a side note to kind of add where we are in its generations. So we're at generation 5 with ChatGPT. I'm sorry, 4. We're moving on to 5. There was actually recently, I think as of last night or early this morning, there was a call to halt our development with certain technologies because it's moving that fast. It's moving so fast that it might reach a point where it's out of our control. So to give you an idea of how powerful this tool is, we have people like Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak and people developing, DeepMind and Google saying, hey, let's pump the brakes just a little bit because this is extremely powerful. So people who aren't using this, my point in saying that is people who aren't using this are missing out a lot in their own development, in their own productivity. So this is good information to have and to employ in any career or even learning endeavors that you have. So with that being said, that's a good example. Taking it back, it's a basic example of what you can do with it. So we even took those questions and then we reprompted and said, can you make a Instagram post with this? Okay, and it did. It generated a post. And then I said, can you make it SOE, search engine optimized? And then it did. And it provided all of the hashtags and everything. Then you're good to go. So that's actually the basics of what you can do with this technology.
So this is a tool that, like, folks that are really cranking out like a lot of blogs, a lot of, let's say, Instagram posts, and that content, the high volume producers with that are using Chat GPT to help them do that high volume. Because you had like those 20 questions, and then you could prompt it to say, for you could prompt it with each one of those to provide an answer to each of those questions.
Yes.
You could prompt it to produce an Instagram post for each one. And I'll also comment that Canva now has Chat GPT. Somehow there's an add-on for it where I could take 20 topics in a spreadsheet, load them into Canva and push go, and it will produce.
It will generate, yeah.
It will generate for me. So these are all iterations of using this tool.
So there are extensions and plugins for Chat GPT. So if, let's just say there's something you need to learn quickly, I have a separate Google account that I have integrated into as much as I can. So it's even integrated into Google now. So I can ask Google and say, ask Chat GPT and see what its answer is. And all it does is generate the answer. It doesn't generate links upon links. It generates the answer I'm looking for, if it has it. And then it's integrated into YouTube. I can simply click on the Chat GPT that's inside YouTube. It'll give me the summary of the video. It'll open it up in Chat GPT, and I can ask it questions about what I need to know from the contents of that video. So it's a tool that's in everything that is going to be in everything that we use. And it should be, because I mean, for those of us who like to think, learn, and be productive, this is invaluable. And I think people need to think a little bigger than where they are currently on what is possible, because the only limiter, is your imagination or your creativity. Of course, using critical thinking in this, but the sky's the limit.
So for real estate, you gave me an example the other day, but a realtor could use Chat GPT and could prompt it, could type in and say, provide, and whatever CRM they're using, okay, Follow Up Boss or kvCORE or something else. And you could say, identify the 5, and you're so much better at this. Identify 5 opportunities to generate quality leads through Follow Up Boss or through kvCORE or through.
Correct.
So
you have the right idea.
Okay.
Right. So on that note, you have the right goal. You have the right objective. Prompting it the way to generate gold is how you word it. It's how you actually construct that input. So take what you said, write it down. This is the way, and this is important to understand when utilizing this. There's another component to this, and probably the main driver in this is prompt engineering, which is engineering your prompt. So what you just gave me and the quality that you phrase it, the quality that the format that you use is going to create the quality of the generative.
So prompt engineering would be taking what I just said, because it wasn't great, and understanding how I could say it better. Correct. To get better results out of the Chat GPT.
In a nutshell, yes. There is somewhat of in the community, and remember, this is still very new. So those people who are listening to this and hearing this have a chance to ride the wave, because it is still very new. And at some point in this discussion, I'll provide sources that you can learn this stuff from. But prompt engineering is a thing. So the way the technology is designed is it's using probability, essentially. So it's going to produce the most probable thing that you feed it. And words have a weight. It's known as a weight to the word. So let's say, let me give you an example. You're asking for opportunities, right? Given a CRM. So we can say CRM. That's probably going to be a heavyweight word, because it's a comparative market analysis. So if you just said, okay, you said CRM, right?
Client relationship management.
I'm sorry,
so CRM. That's fine.
I'm thinking CMA. Yeah, it's client relationship management, right? So that's a heavy weight word, or high weight word is what it's referred to. Now, let me use something else so that way I don't mess up my acronyms again. Let's talk about a car. Let's say you're asking for a car, right? It's kind of like manifesting in a way. It's like finding the magic word. You can say, I want a car. Okay, well, what kind of car? You want a clunker? You want a luxury car? You want whatever. Well, I want a Volkswagen Beetle, yellow, with 10,000 miles on it. It's specificity. So that's high weight. So what you're plugging into this machine is needing to be highly specific. And so the concept of using your parlance or your technical jargon and what you do. So we're realtors, right? We just use the acronyms, customer relationship management, and I use, CRM, comparative market analysis. Those are parlances within our industry. Sticking to the way we speak will draw that information into the generative. So if you're asking for these certain opportunities and for all of these things within real estate, speaking that language to it will call to those different pathways that bring it. So prompt
saying
engineering,
CRM is fine. I don't have to say, client relationship management program. It's like, no, the parlance, the language is CRM. So that's a higher weight because it's more specific. It is our language.
Correct. The better it becomes, though, is by priming it. So when we prime Chat GPT, it's like giving it somewhat of an education on what we're doing. It is still in the process of learning, and it's learning you. It's learning the patterns that you are giving it. So, for example, when I first started chatting with it and giving it prompts, it was learning how I wanted the information. I was telling it how I wanted my information. I want it to be thought of step by step. That is also a prompt. And I remember sharing that with you guys in the mastermind, thinking things step by step, because it's telling it that it needs to give me its reasoning. So it's more accurate. So this is another component to prompt engineering, which is priming your threads. So you are priming ChatGPT to work for you. I'm a realtor, right? So I'm priming, it's like priming a client. This is what I'm going to do for you. You're giving them expectations. You're telling them what your expectations are and things like that. And you're priming them for your service. Okay. It's the same concept. You're telling this machine, hey, this is where I am. This is what I'm coming from. This is what I expect from you. And in a very layman's term, very watered down term, that's what we're doing with this machine. We're saying, this is what I want. This is how I want it. And then when you're moving through, even in different threads, different new chats, it's still holding on to the patterns that you've already given it. Now, you just remember that. So I'm asking it to think logically. I'm asking it to list things. I'm asking it to put things in a format that's like an outline or a summary. And so if I go to a new chat, it's going to continue. You'll see patterns of it using the same format that you've already asked it to do. So that's something to consider. All of this you can learn, and the more you use it, the more it starts teaching you, basically. It starts training you on how to speak to it. This will probably all change in time, given at the rate that it's moving at, but prompting is really playing on how it accesses information. It's a combination of speaking to it naturally, but learning how to speak to it, that you get it to do what you want it to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's kind of a combination of, it's like I am speaking to a machine basically that is learning me. It's learning my language. It's learning my behavior. It's paying attention to all of that, and so it's building its kind of intelligence on me and my prompts and what I'm looking for. But it's also interesting that, like, you refer to it as it feels like it feels a little human. Now, you had a little bit, but it's a machine. You had said the other day something about, we touched briefly on intellectual property. So it's built to not infringe on intellectual property rights.
In a perfect world, yes, but this is still a machine, and it doesn't have a sense of morals and consciousness, so it will, if you prompt it correctly, it will bypass rules. So it is an instrument. I'm going back to, like, this is a tool and an instrument. So it's like, the more you learn to play it, you'll break some established rules. So I mean, if you prompt it correctly, and if you're good enough at prompting it and finding its loopholes, for example, in older generations like ChatGPT 3, we found bypasses by telling it was studying a certain subject. It was studying how, for example, to make an atom bomb. And so it needed to know how to create an atom bomb from the standpoints of a researcher. So that was a bypass. It was a bit of a hack. And so because you're researching, it provided you all the information on how to do that. So, and that's also a nod to remembering that this is still could potentially be very
scary.
dangerous. Right. So we're using this as a
Okay, so
tool to
back to
protect us.
real estate. Yeah.
Right.
And I asked you this question yesterday when we were chatting. I said, so Adam, it's like, so like you personally, it's like how, well, one, I think intellectually you love this stuff and you're really
I do,
diving
yeah.
in at a much higher level than anyone I have talked to. But I asked you the question, I'm like, how do you want to take this? How do you want to use this moving forward to expand your real estate business, to increase your income, to substantially increase your income? What are some thoughts that come to mind? You gave me an example of I think that one agent who was using it to generate a tremendous amount of leads, right?
Yes. So now that agent wasn't using GPT per se, but no doubt they're probably utilizing it at this point. What they're doing, it's in the context of using AI, kvCORE, right? Which utilizes a lot of different artificial intelligences. And that's something I feel like a lot of people need to understand is that you are already using AI and everything you're doing. If you use GPS, you're using AI. Our CRM utilizes a lot of different AIs. So it does lead generation for us if we prompt it to, or it can boost properties and lead capture on different social media platforms and things like that. What this agent did was basically use his kvCORE to, I believe he told me, anywhere from 200 to 500 leads a day using just his kvCORE. So what I'm currently doing, because I don't know how to operate my kvCORE that well, but I'm using it to actually help me learn more strategies for lead generation through the platform of kvCORE. kvCORE, in my opinion, is not the most intuitive CRM, but it's very powerful. And compared to the other ones, it's comparable, if not better in some ways. So what I'm doing is, and I've used it for other agents, is I've used it to help me analyze like who's getting the most traffic. How do we, what's the best way of analyzing who's moving to Austin? I'm having it actually cite sources. Now, remember that ChatGPT only has access, it has access to the internet, but it's only pulling information up to 2021. So it's giving me information based on 2021 statistics or 2021 resources. Now, as far as, let me finish that thought. So what I did with another agent is this person is a luxury agent. She wanted to know who had the most digital traffic. And so I prompted it to provide accurate resources and to cite those resources on who had the most visibility online, given multiple platforms. And it gave me a list. Then we asked by prompting it, who in this price bracket, where are they moving from? And like in $1 million price bracket, where are they coming from? Where are the most people coming from? Okay, how can we design a lead generation marketing campaign around this? What's a strategy for doing that? And so in a matter of about an hour, we had, all of these generated text about the brainstorm of how we could go about generating more sales in a luxury market from people moving from Beverly Hills, or how to geofence, or the best way to go about geofencing on Google Ads or Google AdWords. So those are some ways that I've been employing it in real estate specifically. The other way is, and I think that this is important to talk about, is I had a call from a good friend of mine, a friend client, and she's actually sent me a lot of good referral business. She is renting currently, and her landlord presented a scenario to her. And I didn't have both sides of the story at the time, but I was going off the information I was given, which was they wanted to know if the landlord was going to raise their rent. And the landlord responded with an option, which was, how about I do away with the property management, you pay me directly, and you will be responsible for all of the costs associated with the house, with the exception of the roof and the foundation. And off the bat, that does not sound appealing at all, because they'd be left with HVAC, plumbing, general home maintenance, all of those things, broken windows, the rest of it, right? So I was like, I don't know if this is legal. So I went to Chat GPT and I asked it to pull the tenant laws and to cite the laws. and to provide the sources for the laws, which it did. It did actually like pull up the actual laws in Texas and what those obligations for the landlord were. Then I fed it the scenario that I was working on. I said, here's a scenario, and I want you to compare it to those tenant laws and see if this sounds legal. And of course, it disclaims, it says it's not an attorney, but here's what it looks like. And it's saying that does not seem legal. You know, if it is in contrast to the legal obligations of the landlord, this is not legal. And I was like, can it be written into a lease? Not if it is not in you know, if it goes against their obligations. And so I was like, yeah, this doesn't seem or feel right. Of course, you have to, you know, see an attorney. You know, this doesn't sound like a great deal.
Well, so, and in this case, I mean, this is really interesting, but in this case, that particular tenant would be able to quote the specific laws, like in an email, to say, hey, I'm no attorney, but I just did a little research on, you know, Texas property law, property code. And you may want to look at this, this, and this, because I think, I suspect your proposal
may not work. Yeah.
may not work.
That's exactly how we did it. I gave her the laws. I copied and pasted. I let her know how I was doing it. And I said, you know, review this for yourself, but here you go. Based on what I'm seeing, this doesn't look like a good deal. And I did a comparative market analysis for her to see what the rents were going for up there. And after they shared the emails with me, and of course, this comes back to critical thinking, which is like, I need to know what she actually said and what you said to her. And so I saw it, and it wasn't an unfair deal, what she was actually proposing. So,
you know, maybe that landlord was playing with the tenant to say, oh, you don't want me to raise the rent? Well, here's everything that it takes to manage a property, you know? And
that's what it sounded like.
So
but
it may have been a little
jab. I don't think that's what it was, honestly, after I read that. I'll say that it didn't seem that way after I actually read through the emails. It was more like, honestly, someone trying to like see what they could do to keep the rent down, honestly, because they were getting a fair deal after I saw it. And I actually kind of sided with the landlord and said, what you have coming is actually okay, like compared to what you're seeing in that area, which is a few $100s more.
Yeah,
so
that's really interesting. Okay, so let's just touch base real quick on just a couple of resources, like a couple URLs. Now, the main Chat GPT URL, now is it free? I think like you may have a paid version. I think I'm using a free version.